So I'm going to go ahead and dive in here. So welcome everyone. This is David Raymond using Zoom. I'm not a long-time Zoom user, so bear with me. So welcome to the first Virginia Cyber Range weekly workshop. I've got Maureen Kuther here with me. She is our outreach and development lead, and she is going to help me keep track of questions or comments that are coming in on the chat window. So I'm gonna, I'll pull up the chat. So I've got the chat on a different monitor, but I'm not gonna pay much attention to it. And Maureen, I'm sure will yell at me if I miss anything. So this is David Raymond, and I'm the director of the Virginia Cyber Range, and I'm gonna kick off our first Virginia Cyber Range weekly workshop. And the purpose of this workshop series is to cover a range of cybersecurity topics. And the intent is to primarily to help folks who are getting started teaching cybersecurity courses in wherever, high schools, colleges, universities, whatever. You know, if you've been teaching cybersecurity for a long time, then you may not get a whole lot of value out of this. But if you're just getting started teaching cybersecurity, what I hope to do is cover a variety of different topics to provide you know, some background and some words to go along with some slides, perhaps, that are in the Cyber Basics courseware, and I'm happy to also cover any other topics that folks would like me to delve into. But we have, for the first few sessions, we have a sort of a schedule laid out on our webpage, and so I'm going to cover the topics that I have laid out for the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, and then after that, I'll sort of drive on with a whole host of different topics that I have kind of at my fingertips, or I'm happy to talk about topics that people suggest. So we'll try to do these on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. And I'm sure that's not a perfect time for everybody who might be interested. So these discussions will always be recorded for later viewing. They'll be posted on our website, and I will keep them under an hour. My intent is to keep them at less than an hour. So my expectation is these will be between 30 minutes and an hour long, and we'll try to do them every week. If I'm not available, we've got other folks who are interested and certainly able to cover a bunch of different topics. And then if there's a holiday or some other reason, then there may be a cancellation on a week. But for the most part, we're going to try to do this every week. We're certainly going to include coverage of the Virginia Cyber Range, but that's not what this is all about, right? We're not exclusively talking about the Cyber Range. We're going to cover a whole bunch of different topics. To start out, I am going to focus a little bit on the Virginia Cyber Range, just because I know that we've got some new users, and it's you know, we try to make our user interface pretty straightforward for instructors, but you know, what's straightforward for me may not be straightforward for everyone. So what I'm going to do, particularly today, is introduce sort of how to get started in the Virginia Cyber Range. So how do I get my course set up? You know, how do I request a course? How do I enroll students in the course? How do I add exercise environments? You know, how do I get help when something's gone wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're a longtime user of the Virginia Cyber Range, then again, today's session may not be of huge value, although I may point out some stuff that you haven't used before or haven't seen, particularly in our new user interface. There are some features that behave a little bit differently. So I'll point those out as we go along. As I mentioned, long list of potential topics. So we'll start out today and probably next week and maybe the week after, talking about features and usage around the Virginia Cyber Range. And then we'll talk about, we'll also cover some general cybersecurity topics. So, you know, just basic intro to cybersecurity, cryptography, networking, authentication, system hardening. We'll talk about cybersecurity career paths. We can talk about network scanning, penetration testing, web application vulnerability scanning, intrusion detection. There's just a long list of interesting topics that we can drill into. And when I can, I'm going to use a hands-on exercise from the cyber range that you can use with your students, right? I may sort of start out diving into some of the cyber basics, hands-on exercises, and talk about how to use some of those in the classroom, and that for a lot of topics that works really well. If you sort of give, kind of the classic example I like to use is I'll give a talk on passwords. How passwords are represented in modern operating systems, and and then we'll do like hands-on password cracking using the Virginia Cyber Range, and what you get from that is you not only get an understanding of how passwords work and get sort of a conceptual understanding, but you get like this no kidding real world understanding of how people exploit bad passwords. So we tell students a lot that you should pick good passwords, and then we define good password for them, right? We say it should be 10 characters long, it should have uppercase, lowercase, special characters, but what we usually don't talk about is why those things are important, why they make, how they differentiate a good password from a bad password, and how somebody can exploit a bad password. And lots of people continue to use poor passwords. So that's just an example of a topic area where we can cover an important topic and then use a Virginia Cyber Range hands-on exercise to sort of bring the point home. And that's something that I think is great to do with students in the classroom. And I use that example in the classroom with students at all levels, right? Grad students and undergrads, and I think it's even appropriate for high school students. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if there's a particular topic you'd like to see, then you should suggest it to us. And so we have an email address you can send suggestions to. So there's probably the best one is to send it to contact@virginiacyberrange.org. If you have a topic that you want to suggest for these workshops. Okay, so the agenda today, I'm just going to give a very brief background and mission of the Virginia Cyber Range. Again, if you're a longtime user, this might not be very interesting. I'll keep it short, but I just want folks to know where we're coming from and why. And I'll talk about the different account types. Sometimes causes a little bit of confusion. I'll give a quick overview of the Virginia Cyber Range courseware repository, so you know how to find things there that might be useful. And then I will spend considerable time talking about using the exercise area. So I will come into a course just like somebody who requested a new course would come into it, right? You submit a course request, and we create the course for you, and then you'll log in for the first time, and you will see a course with no people in it and no exercises in it, and what you need to do is add students, add exercise environments, and we'll go through that process. And then I'll also cover how you get to the knowledge base and how you ask for help if things are going wrong. Okay, so just to dive right in. People may be familiar with this already, but the Virginia Cyber Range has been around for just over 2 years. So we were funded on the 1st of July, 2016, and funded right out of the state budget, right? So this was in the biennial budget for the 2017-2018 biennium, fiscal biennium. So we started out on the 1st of July with no people, no equipment, no office, just money. And so since then we've created what is now the Virginia Cyber Range. And on this slide I've given the budget language, and So it's in some ways it's very specific, and in some ways it's kind of vague, right? So the budget language says that there was 2 years of funding designated to support the cyber range platform to be used for security training by students in Virginia's high schools, community colleges, and four-year institutions. So this is all about cybersecurity education. Money from the state government focused on cybersecurity education in Virginia public high schools, community colleges, and universities. And then there's talk of a consortium that includes Virginia public institutions with a certification of academic excellence from the federal government. So that's a specific list of colleges and universities in Virginia who have this federal certification, and it's actually an NSA certification, National Security Agency certification. So obviously some of this is very specific. A cyber range focused on education and with certain people involved in advising the way forward for the range. But what's left out of this budget language is what exactly is the Virginia Cyber Range, or what is a cyber range? So from that budget language, we created a mission statement, and I'll leave this up briefly. I'm not going to read it. So essentially, we restated the budget language, and then at the bottom there, we mentioned that we're looking to increase the number and the preparedness of students entering the cybersecurity workforce in a variety of areas. And really, the focus is on Virginia, but what helps Virginia helps the United States, I would say, particularly because because of Virginia's proximity to the national capital, and the way the workforce in Virginia really supports the Department of Defense and the federal government in many ways. So this is all about helping out the state and the federal government. Okay, so now we get to what is the Virginia Cyber Range, and we like to say that there are 3 primary components to the Cyber Range. On the far left there, we have a courseware repository, and so courseware is things like course syllabi, lesson plans, presentation slides, homework exercises, exams, et cetera, and those are in a web portal that I will show off here in just a second. And the intent of the courseware repository is to help teachers who are in the classroom trying to teach cybersecurity concepts. There's lots of courseware available for algebra and for European history, but there's not a huge amount of cybersecurity courseware available to educators just because it's a relatively new area and it'll take time for this stuff to be built up. So what we hope to do with our courseware repository is provide courseware that is appropriate for various levels of cybersecurity education. In the middle there, we have the exercise area. That's kind of the crown jewel of the Virginia Cyber Range, right? That's where we focus a lot of our effort, is on creating and maintaining this exercise area. This is where we provide infrastructure for students to do hands-on cybersecurity exercises as part of their cybersecurity coursework. And you'll see from the exercise area that what we've tried to do is make it so that the instructor, the key person in our infrastructure is the instructor. We create an account for an instructor and a course, and once we do that, we hand the course over to the instructor, and the instructor owns it from there, right? So the instructor enrolls their students, the instructor provisions environments for the students in their class, and it's really very powerful from the instructor perspective. Sometimes more powerful means a little bit more complicated. So it's not turnkey in that we create a course for you and you join it and everything is there ready for you. And the reason for that is a couple reasons for that. First of all, we don't have the staff to pull that off, right? We would, we have hundreds of courses provisioned in the range, and we just don't have the staff that we need to individually administer each one of those courses. And the other reason for that is we really want the instructor to be able to do what he or she wants with the course, right? We don't, if you have to call us every time you need a an exercise environment provisioned, it might take 10 minutes, it might take 2 days, it might take a week before somebody gets back to you. But instead of doing that, if we just give you the power to provision exercise environments and enroll students, then you can essentially do it all yourself and you don't have to wait for us. So really one of the primary goals is giving power to the instructor. And then we have some capture the flag environment that we are able to provision for instructors, and we'll talk about that in a later weekly workshop. And then on the far right there, we have a community of purpose. We're really trying to build a community of cybersecurity educators across the state of Virginia, and we do lots of different things to develop this community. We first of all, we're governed by an executive committee made up of cybersecurity educators from across the state of Virginia. We are in the midst of creating a K-12 advisory board, and there was information about that in our recent mailing email out to folks on our mailing list. And then we also convene workshops like this. We convene an annual conference. So we held a conference in the middle of August. And again, it's all about building this community so you can reach out to each other as well as to us to help teach cybersecurity. Okay, so that's the background on the Virginia Cyber Range. A couple of different types of accounts that you should have in the Virginia Cyber Range. If you're a user, if you're going to use the courseware in the exercise area, there are 2 different accounts that you need to get. And I'm going to pull up a web browser and demonstrate how to get to these different accounts. So here I am in the Virginia Cyber Range webpage, and I'm not logged in. And so if I want to get request accounts for the different sides of the Virginia Cyber Range, if I go to the sign up button in the upper right hand corner, one thing I want an account in the courseware repository that lets me download content out of the repository. So here we have the request a new account page, and this is pretty important up at the top here. Account access is currently limited to faculty only at Virginia high schools, colleges, and universities teaching in the area of cybersecurity and related topics. So when someone requests an account in the courseware repository, then we're going to do some vetting to make sure that they are who they say they are, right? So we just check to make sure that the person is an educator at a Virginia educational institution, and that's again to support the budget language that tells us that those who are the people who we should be providing access to. And it's also the case that we only provide access to educators to the courseware repository, and the reason for that is there are exams and hands-on exercises and other stuff in the repository that contain things like answer keys. And so what we're not going to do is give access to a student who then has access to answer keys that they might run into when they're taking a course at their college or high school. So we keep it on the courseware side. Access is only available to educators. So we ask for email address, first name, last name, school name, et cetera, standard stuff. Make you tell us that you're not a robot down at the bottom. And so that's one of the accounts that you need to get full use of the cyber range. And again, that gives access to the courseware repository. The other side of the range is what we call here the range. This is the exercise area. And this is where you can provision resources for your students in our virtual environment. So here we ask for similar information: first name, last name, position, title, school district, etc. Obvious question might be, why are there 2 different accounts? And the answer to that is fairly involved, but I'll just say that these are 2 these are two separate entities that are hosted in two different places, and in order to get it up and running quickly, the easiest path forward was to make two different accounts. And we're eventually going to go back and consolidate these accounts, but that's going to take some effort and some resources that, frankly, right now we would rather devote to improving other features in the range. And so, once we're at a place where we're sort of happy with the user interface and we're happy with the available features, then we're going to go back and look at consolidating the accounts so that you only need one account to get into the Virginia Cyber Range. But for now, you've got to have two different accounts, and that's how you request the two different accounts. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, let me see if there's anything else on that slide. Yeah, no. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is talk briefly about the courseware repository. So we know what it is, right? It's courseware along a variety of different topic areas. And so let me dive in here to the courseware. So here I am browsing the courseware repository, and this is just what you think it is, right? It's content management system that lets you gain access to the things that I mentioned, course syllabi, lesson plans, presentation slides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you can sort of browse the repository by clicking through the different pages here. I'm not sure how many pages there are total, but a better way to find what you're looking for is to search on a particular topic. And the topic that I think is most useful to folks who are getting started teaching cybersecurity is the Cyber Basics courseware. So I just type Cyber Basics into the search bar here, and I get back a course and then a handful of modules/workshops and a handful of exercises, and these are all part of this. All of the things listed here are part of this what we call a course called Cyber Basics. And so I'm just going to click on the Cyber Basics course, and what you get here is a description of the course, learning objectives in the course, and then a list of 7 different modules. And I'll mention that module 0 here is a new module. So if you're familiar with the Cyber Basics course before, about a month ago, there were 6 modules, and we added one to the very beginning, and it's a introduction to Linux. And really, all that is a series of hands-on exercises that provide sort of that are very at a very introductory level. They provide some Linux command line hands-on exercises, and the idea there is that if students are going to get into a cybersecurity career field, really Linux, you have to have an understanding of the Linux operating system and using Linux from the command line. For us kind of regular computer users, we can generally get away with a Windows machine and some basic software that we install on it. But if you're going to delve deeply into a technical career field like cybersecurity, then you have to have some experience with the Linux command line. And even students who aren't going to go down that career path, it's good for them to have an understanding of, first of all, an understanding that there are other operating systems besides Windows, right? So Windows is just one of a handful of operating systems that people install on computers to do different jobs, and then getting familiar with the command line gives a little bit deeper level of understanding of how computers function. So it's not it's something that's certainly useful for any student taking a cybersecurity course, even if they're not going to become a career security person. So I'll dial into one of the modules here. So this is module 3, cryptography. For the modules, again, we provide a description and a list of learning objectives, and then there are a list of lessons. And when I click on a lesson, I get a description of the lesson, some learning objectives, and then I get a couple of files. And so you'll notice I can't click on these files until I'm logged in. So here I'm going to log in, and now what I can do is I can download the resources, and these are provided in editable format, right? So this is the lesson plan, and it's a Word document. And then also included in this particular lesson is a PowerPoint slide deck, and again, this is editable. These are all shared under a Creative Commons license, and it's a attribution non-commercial share alike Creative Commons license. Basically what that says is that you're welcome to use the content in the classroom. You can modify it in any way. What you cannot do is you cannot use it for financial gain. So you can't take our courseware and sell it to somebody else, for example. But you can modify it. You can use it in the classroom. Do whatever you want to do with it, other than selling it to somebody. Okay, so then quickly back at the courseware repository page, you can also do some filtering here on the right side to filter things for the education level. You can filter for experience level. You can look for specific knowledge, skills, and abilities out of the cybersecurity workforce framework, et cetera, et cetera. So it's worth sort of playing around with the filters and looking at how you can filter out different content. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about with regard to the courseware repository. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to jump into the exercise area. And so if you have an exercise area account, you will have associated that account with an open ID provider, either Google, Facebook, or Microsoft. Most people use Google just because it's probably the most reliable, and it's at the top of the list. I guess that's probably the reason why most people use it. So I'm going to sign in to the courseware repository, and I'm going to use, you have to use the same provider you used when you first accepted your invitation email. So here I am in the Virginia Cyber Range exercise area. Again, if you don't have an account in the exercise area, then what you should do is go to the web page, click the sign up button, and then go to then click on the range. Yeah, click on the range and fill out the form. But then you'll receive an email invitation into the range. So I've already done that. I have 2 different courses here, and I'm going to focus initially. I'm going to focus on the course that's shown on the left-hand side here. So BHS 6302 Cybersecurity Fundamentals. So we'll say that this is a course that was just created for me, so that I could teach my cybersecurity fundamentals class. So normally, if you when you first have an account created for you and a course created for you, you'll see a single course. And I'm going to click into the course, and here I get a description of the course and a status. And if we create the course for you, the status is going to be ready. If you request a course yourself, I'll talk about that later, then that status will be pending until the course is approved. So here I am in my cybersecurity fundamentals course, and there are no students and no exercise environments. So we need to fix that, right? So the first thing I want to do, and actually you can do this in any order, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an exercise environment. And when I click on the Add Exercise Environment button and then click on the environment line, what I see is a list of environments that are available to me. And so there's about a dozen on our standard list here of environments. And so I'm going to click on the Cyber Basics environment. And now I haven't provisioned this to anybody. I haven't actually created copies of this environment to be made for me or anybody else yet. All I've done is I've selected that environment from the list, and that gives me a description of the exercise environment. So this virtual environment is tended to be used for introductory to intermediate cybersecurity exercises, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then here at the bottom, the login credentials for the Kali Linux virtual machine are student/student. So username is student, password is student. And this same description is what your students see. And so you can edit this. If you're gonna provision this exercise environment, you can edit this description to say whatever you want. There's a limit of 5,000 characters in the description, but if you want to use an exercise environment only for one very specific exercise, and you want to describe the exercise in that description area, then you can change it however you would like to change it. Now, so we provide a short description here. If you want a more detailed description, and this is available only to instructors, so your students don't see this link to the exercise environment description, but if you're an instructor, then you can click on the exercise environment description, and this will take you back over to the courseware repository, and it gives you a description of the Cyber Basics environment, describes the virtual machines in the environment. So I should have mentioned that, when I use the term exercise environment, an exercise environment is one or more virtual machines in a subnet that can access each other via the network. So in this case, the exercise environment is 4 virtual machines. One of them is a Kali Linux virtual machine, which is a computer with a particular operating system that is widely used by cybersecurity professionals and penetration testers, people who do vulnerability analysis as a cybersecurity person. This particular exercise environment also includes a vulnerable web server, a vulnerable Samba server, which is Samba is a protocol for file sharing, and then a FTP server, file transfer protocol server. So this is another system that can be used for different kinds of cybersecurity hands-on exercises. So this exercise environment includes those 4 virtual machines. And if you're going to use courseware out of the Cyber Basics curriculum, this is the best virtual environment to pick, because it's the environment that you need for all of the hands-on exercises in the Cyber Basics courseware. So then after the description of the virtual machines, then what we have is a list of corresponding exercises. So these are some hands-on exercises that you can use with this particular environment. These are all available in the Cyber Basics curriculum. And then at the bottom, we have a little bit more information about the environment. So this just gives a more detailed description of what you have available from this particular exercise environment. And I'm going to go back to get to that page I was just at, what I did was I clicked this link to the exercise environment description. Down at the bottom here, I have a start date for the exercise environment. So when I want to make it available to my students, and I can select the date. If I don't want it to be available right away, I can say that the students won't see it when they log in until next Monday, for example. And I say that the exercise environment is going to not be visible anymore to the students. The default date here is the end of the year, right? So this is December 31st, 2018. If I only want it to be available to them until the end of next week, then I can select the end of next week, and after that date, the virtual environment, it won't be visible to the students anymore. It'll still be there, and I can make it visible again by changing these dates, but the students will only see the virtual environment in their Virginia Cyber Range account between the dates that are listed here, start date and end date. So once I'm happy with the description and with the dates, and that this is the exercise environment that I want, then I click the confirm button. And now what happens is I see the exercise environment appear on my course. And when I click on it, I see that I get my description again. Again, this is the same description that the students will see. And I see that I get this little processing window thing, icon. And what that tells me is that the virtual environment is being provisioned in the Cyber Range backend. So these things aren't sitting there waiting for somebody to select them. When you select a virtual environment for your course, what happens is the set of virtual environments required for that, the set of VMs required for that virtual environment are all going to be created on the fly when you click that button. So it takes 10 or 15 minutes for those resources to be ready to go. Really, we suggest that if you're gonna create a virtual environment for students to use, you should do it a few hours before they're going to use it, just to make sure everything gets provisioned. It's really all about load on the public cloud-based Cyber Range backend, and if there's a lot of load, then it can take longer for environments to get provisioned. So do it before you need it. Okay, so now my environment is being provisioned. I can go back and edit things about the environment later, so I can change the name, I can change the description, I can change the dates that they're available at any time by clicking the little pencil icon in the upper right-hand corner. And once I'm done with this exercise environment, so my students don't need it anymore, I can delete it, and that just conserves resources for us. So we ask that when you don't need an environment anymore, you go ahead and delete it. Okay, I'm going to go back to my, I'm going to go back one level, right? So right now I'm in this Cyber Basics exercise environment. I'm going to go back to my course by clicking my breadcrumb trail here in the upper left corner. Okay, so now I'm back to my course, right? BHS 6302 Cybersecurity Fundamentals. So I have provision and exercise environment, but I don't have any students in the course. And so in order to enroll students in my course, I want to go to the upper right corner and I want to click on the button that has a tooltip that says Manage Course Users. So I'll click on that, and I see that the only person in the course right now is me. So I'm David, instructor. And so I want to add some students. So a couple of different ways to add students. I'm going to start with the one, the middle button here that says Invite a User to this course. And I'm going to click on that. Invite a user to this course. So what this does is when I fill this out, what it'll do is it will send emails to students that I invite into the course, and the email will include a link that they can use one time to gain access to that course. So here I could type in a name, David student, and I could type in an email address. And then I confirm. Okay, so I just invited a single student, and I see that listed here, right? So davidstudent467@gmail.com, and that student has been invited to my course. And if I look over on the right-hand side, I can see who has accepted the invitations and who hasn't. if the student has accepted the invitation, then here it's going to show under the login with column, it's going to show what OpenID provider that the student used to log into the Virginia Cyber Range, either Google, LinkedIn, or Microsoft. And we give you that because a student might have trouble logging into the range, and they might come back to you and say, hey, I can't log in. I'm trying my Facebook credentials and they don't work. And if you go here and you see that they logged in using Google credentials, then you can go back to them and say, you have to log in with the same credentials that you used when you first accepted your course invitation. So go back and try it again with your Gmail or with your Google credentials, and you'll be able to get in. And then pending since, this just gives the date that the invitation was first sent, and so you can track, how long that invitation has been out there. And if a student says, if you, sometimes you invite a whole bunch of students and a couple of them come back to you and say, hey, I never got the invitation, can you resend it? If you click the little gearbox on the far left side here, you can click the re-invite button, and that sends the invitation email again to that same student. I can also invite bulk users, right? I can invite multiple users at the same time, and the way I do that is I click on that same middle button, the invite a user to the course button, and then down at the bottom left, there's a link that says invite multiple users. And if I do that, I get this little workflow, right? Invite multiple users. And so what I can do is I can download a template, a CSV file, comma separated values. It's gonna, on my machine, it's gonna show up as a Excel document. So if I click on that, I get this template, and the template includes first name, last name, email address, and then whether they're a student or TA. And so the idea here, of course, is that you modify the names and the email addresses to match your particular course. And once you do that and save it, I'm not going to save it, I'm just going to choose that file. Once you do that and save it, then you click the choose file button, you browse to that list. If I can find it, it's called template.csv. Okay, so I chose that file, template.csv. It was in my downloads folder. Click next. And now what I see is, I see the list, right? The thing that I just pulled out of the template. So it's got first name, last name, email address, and then the role, whether they're a student or a TA. And so maybe I go back and look at this and I say, well, Jane Doe shouldn't be a TA. Jane Doe should be a student. Maybe John Doe is the TA. TA stands for teaching assistant. And the TA has, if you have students who are designated as teaching assistants, then there's some things that they can do that regular students can't do. Like they can see all the other students in the course, and they can, they can invite other students, etc. Most high schools aren't going to have TAs, but college professors may have teaching assistants, and the idea is that they can hand off some of the duties associated with administering their Virginia Cyber Range course with a TA. So once I've done that, then I click the import button, and I see that 4 users have been added successfully. And so now when I go back to my users page, I see those all those different students, and I can see that none of them have accepted their invitation into the range. And what your students will see when they receive an invitation, I'm going to pull my, so I have another browser window open here, and this is the email invitation that I just received as davidstudent467@gmail.com. And so when I click on that invitation, I see, Dear David Student, welcome to BHS 6302 Cybersecurity Fundamentals. So this is the email that your students will receive. And then when I click on that link, it's going to take me to back to the Virginia Cyber Range, and it's going to let me associate my OpenID provider with my account. So let me do that real quick. So here I am. I just clicked on the link as David Student. So now I'm going to click Sign in with Google. I'm going to use that Google account. And now here I'm David Student, and now I see that class listed, BHS 6302 Cybersecurity Fundamentals, and I will see the exercise environment that my teacher provisioned for me, and if I click the join button, then I can pull up that exercise environment. And so I'm going to log out. So that was me accepting an invitation as a student. Right now I'm going to sign back in as an instructor so I can finish out this discussion of features. So now I'm back in as the instructor in BHS 6302 Cybersecurity Fundamentals. I have provisioned an exercise environment, the Cyber Basics exercise environment, and I have invited some users. If I now click on the exercise environment, when I first did this, I only saw one copy of it, right? When I first provisioned this thing, there was only one copy of the exercise environment, and that's the one that belongs to me. And if I join that exercise environment, that opens up another browser tab, and now I can log in and it's ready for me to use, right? It doesn't take very long. In this case, it got provisioned within just a few minutes. Okay, so so that's my copy as the instructor. If I look below that, I see the exercise environments that were provisioned for each one of the students that I just invited into the course, right? So these things are provisioned and probably just about ready to go. So now what I can do as the instructor is I can join any one of these exercise environments. So if you have, for example, a student who's trying to complete an exercise and they're having trouble, then or they think they did something and you want to make sure that they did it, then you can join their exercise environments and see what they've done. The other thing you can do is you can reset an exercise environment. So if a student breaks something in the exercise, which is possible, right? The students have administrator access to these exercise environments. So if they do something wrong and cause the environment to not be usable anymore, then you can click the reset button. And so I just click the shutdown button on that exercise environment. So the stop button that basically turns off all the virtual machines. And what will show up here in a couple of minutes after this thing is done shutting down is there'll be a reset button that only the instructor can see. But what it lets me do as the instructor is basically reset the virtual environment back to the way it was when it was first provisioned. So if a student causes some problem in their virtual machine that makes it so it doesn't work anymore, that resets it so it can be used by the student again. And maybe this is going to take longer than I want to wait, so you just have to trust me that there'll be a reset button here when these things are all shut down. Okay, a couple other things I want to cover quickly before we wrap up here. I want to leave a minute or two for questions, but I want to point out that I just covered a lot of stuff, and if you want the same sort of coverage in a more bite-sized series of tutorials, if you click on the account icon in the upper right-hand corner of the window, the Virginia Cyber Range exercise area window. If you click on that, you'll see there's a link here to a knowledge base, there's a link here to support, and then there's the logout link. The knowledge base is just a bunch of short articles that describe how to do different things in the Virginia Cyber Range, mostly related to the exercise area. So there's a frequently asked questions area that just gives some basic information about different questions that we get asked on a regular basis. There's a getting started area. So a quick start guide for students. So this is something that you can give to your students. It's a PDF that I basically email to my students at the beginning of the semester when we're going to use the Virginia Cyber Range, and it just shows them the process of receiving the email to get invited into a course, clicking the link, and then associating their OpenID provider with their Virginia Cyber Range account so that next time they need to get to it, they can get to it. There are quick start guides for instructors. So getting an instructor account and creating your first course, enrolling students, adding exercise environments, getting started videos. So some of these are videos. So here's little videos with music. So how do you enroll your students? I'm not going to wait for it, but and then some of them are just articles. So getting started with creating and provisioning a course. So this is a lot of the stuff that I just went over. If you go to this now, you'll see some, mostly you'll see the old user interface. So some of the visuals are going to be a little bit different. We've upgraded our user interface over the summer to make it more easy to follow and also make it more responsive. And so some of our tutorials still show the old user interface, but we'll update those over time. So that's the knowledge base. Again, there's troubleshooting, there's how to get different kinds of accounts, and then there's some other resources. And of course, you can also search the knowledge base. And if you don't find what you want in the knowledge base, then I'll go back to my exercise area course here and click on the upper right-hand corner, the account icon. If you click on the support button, so I should mention that the knowledge base is available to students and instructors in the range, and then the support is also available to instructors and students. And what support does is, the topic is going to be my course. In this case, I'm going to select BHS 6302, and then here's a subject. Students can't log in. Maybe I'm having problems with student logins, and I want to inform the technical team here that my students are having problems, right? So I can submit a support ticket as an instructor, and this support ticket, it essentially generates an email that goes to support@virginiacyberrange.org, and that ends up in our ticketing system. So we have a ServiceNow ticketing system, and this support request will go into the queue, and then somebody will pick it up off the queue and address it, usually within a business day. And you'll get an email back from somebody that asks you to elaborate on your problem, or saying that we fixed your problem or whatever. If a student clicks on the support button and fills out an email, that doesn't come to our ticketing system, that comes to you, right? It comes to the instructor. And so we give the instructor the power to sort of own the course. We also give the instructor the responsibility to help their students if our students are having problems. So if you have a student that's having trouble, and they click a support ticket, you're going to get the email. If it's something that you can't fix, then you can forward it on to support@virginiacyberrange.org, and we'll help you help the student, basically. Okay, I'm going to stop there. didn't quite cover as much as I wanted to because maybe talked too slow, but I'm going to stop there and I'm going to see if anybody has questions that I need to address. So if anybody has any questions, just throw them up in the chat window, and I'm going to take a quick look at it here and see if there's anything, see if there's anything that I need to address. Okay. So I see the question from Ed from Utah, and we'll close the loop with you. I'll just say that we're funded by Virginia, but soon we're going to be providing service to others, and we'll talk about what that means. Any other questions from anybody? Things that I need to address quickly before we sign off? I want to keep it less than an hour, so I got about a minute left here. Okay, so I'm going to close it up now. Thanks for being here. Again, if you're a regular Virginia Cyber Range user, this might not have been super helpful, but there'll be more on some more in-depth topics in the future, and we appreciate your joining us today. So thanks.